So, you ever stop and think about how we got here? I mean, from having to wait a whole week for the next episode of a show to, well, to this, an entire global library of video right there on your phone. The origin story of streaming, it's way stranger, way more chaotic, and honestly, way more rock and roll than you'd ever guess.
So, let's just get right into it. The internet, when it first started, it was all about text. Just emails, files, really simple web pages. It was absolutely not built for the huge, constant fire hose of data that video demands. Trying to stream a video back then? Yeah, that was like trying to push an ocean through a garden hose. Just not gonna happen. So how in the world did we get from that to where we are now? Well, it all kicked off when a group of scientists, who also happened to be in a garage band, decided they were going to do the impossible.
I mean, this story is really about one of the biggest shifts in media history ever. Think about it. We went from a world of scheduled TV, you had to be on your couch at 8 p.m. on a Thursday night to catch your show, or you missed it. We went from that to the on-demand world we're all living in now. It was a complete and total revolution. And this quote right here, it just nails the core change. The entire idea of a channel, like a Channel 3 or an HBO, it just started to dissolve. Instead, everything shifted to the asset. What's the asset? It's the one movie you want to watch, the one specific TV show, that one video clip. The content itself started coming directly to you instead of you having to tune into it. Okay, to really get why this was so revolutionary, you have to kind of transport yourself back to the early 90s. The big, huge, massive problem was bandwidth. I mean, just sending a video stream to one single person was insanely hard. It would strain the whole network. So sending that same stream to thousands of people at the same time, forget about it. That was pure science fiction.
So the breakthrough, the thing that changed everything, came down to a really fundamental tech difference. The early internet, it used something called unicast. Basically, if 100 people wanted to watch a video, the server had to work its butt off and send out 100 separate, identical streams. It's just wildly inefficient, right? The solution was multicast. Think of it like a radio broadcast. You send out one single stream, and anyone who's got the right receiver can just tune in. That was the key. That was the game changer.
And this is where it gets really clever. Since the regular old internet just couldn't handle multicast, a bunch of brilliant researchers basically built a network on top of the internet to make it happen. They called it the M-bone, short for multicast backbone. You can think of it like this. The regular internet was just a bunch of slow dirt roads. The M-bone was like a secret experimental superhighway for video that they built right over it.
So you've got this secret video superhighway. Who do you think were the first people to really take it for a spin? A big TV network, maybe? A Hollywood movie studio? Nope, not even close. It was a garage band. And the best part? It was a garage band made up of the exact same computer scientists who had access to all this crazy bleeding-edge tech.
So let's meet our heroes, shall we? The band's name was Severe Tire Damage. Awesome, right? And these guys, by day, they were these brilliant researchers at the absolute epicenters of innovation. We're talking places like Xerox PARC, Apple, the legends. But by night, they were just a rock band messing around in a garage. It was this perfect, weird combination of genius-level tech access and just a creative itch to do something cool that put them in the absolute perfect spot to make history. And here's the timeline of how it all went down. So, the N-bone gets created in these research labs. Then, on June 24th, 1993, Severe Tire Damage jumps on it and broadcasts the first ever live concert over the internet. It was a huge proof of concept. But then, a little over a year later, one of the biggest bands on the entire planet decided they wanted to try the exact same thing. And yeah, we're talking about the Rolling Stones. Their involvement was the moment this weird, super niche academic experiment just exploded into the mainstream. This wasn't some garage band that only a few nerds knew about anymore. This was rock and roll royalty stepping into the future, and suddenly the whole world was paying attention. But first, let's just put this in perspective. Remember that first broadcast by Severe Tire Damage? The audience for that was microscopic. It was basically just their scientist buddies in the US and Australia who even knew how to get on the M-bone. Literally just a handful of people saw history being made. Okay, now, the Rolling Stones concert in 1994, an estimated 50,000 people tuned in. You have to understand, for 1994, that number is it's mind-blowing. It was a huge chunk of everyone who was even on the internet at the time, all scrambling to watch this grainy little video feed coming from a stadium in Dallas.
But let's be super clear here. This was not your 4K stream, not even close. The experience was more like watching a blurry, sputtering postage stamp. The video was super choppy, the audio was all garbled, but you know what? None of that mattered, not one bit. The point was it was happening. It was real. For the very first time, a live concert was being broadcast to the whole world over the internet.
Okay, and this is where the story takes its most brilliant, most chaotic turn. Because you have to remember, the M-Bone was this open, non-commercial, kind of academic network. And that created a beautiful little loophole. It created an opportunity for our original pioneers, Severe Tire Damage, to pull off one of the greatest stunts in digital history.
I mean, even Mick Jagger knew how wild this was. When he got up to the mic, he literally said he was welcoming the audience to the M-Bone. He wasn't just welcoming them to the concert, he was welcoming them to this new digital frontier. Everyone knew they were part of some massive global experiment.
So here's the heist. Here's how they did it. The guys in Severe Tire Damage realized, hey, wait a minute. The Rolling Stones don't own this M-Bone channel. It's an open network. It's like owning the air that radio waves travel through. You can't. So right before the Stones were supposed to start their broadcast, the band fired up their own gear and just started playing on the exact same channel. So anybody who tuned in early to see the Rolling Stones, they got a blast of Severe Tire Damage instead. They literally became the unbilled, uninvited opening act for one of the biggest bands in the world. And this whole story, it's not just some fun piece of internet trivia. It's the DNA of the streaming world we live in. That chaotic, rule-breaking, do-it-yourself spirit that was born from this one rock band's clever stunt, that is the foundation of everything from YouTube to Twitch to TikTok today. And this right here is maybe the most important takeaway from the whole thing. Back in those early days, you didn't need to ask for permission from some TV executive to broadcast yourself to the world. You just needed to have the tech skills to do it. The gatekeepers weren't these big corporations. The gatekeepers were the ones who understood the technology. That was a fundamental, earth-shattering shift in who held the power to communicate with the masses.
If you're of a certain age, you remember the sound of a dial-up modem. That screeching, beeping chaos was the sound of the future arriving, but it was also a massive, massive bottleneck. We're going to wind the clock all the way back to the wild west of the internet, from about 1995 to 2002, to explore the chaotic, buffering-filled birth of streaming media and the wars that were fought just to get a tiny video through those copper wires.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the fundamental problem, the dial-up dilemma. Then we'll meet the pioneer who actually broke through it. After that, we'll dive into the huge corporate battle that followed, look at an absolutely massive .com gamble, and finally, we'll connect all those dots to the seamless streaming we can't live without today.
All right, to really understand the streaming revolution, you first have to appreciate the problem. The huge, fundamental problem everyone was desperately trying to solve back in the day. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? Draining a swimming pool through a drinking straw? I mean, that perfectly captures the sheer absurdity of the challenge. The ambition to stream video was absolutely massive, but the pipeline to get it there was just incredibly, incredibly tiny.
And let's put some hard numbers on that drinking straw. Your average modem in 1995 gave you about 28.8 kilobits per second. But just CD quality audio, not video, just audio, needed over 1,400. You can see the problem, right? The math just didn't work. Something radical had to be done to the data itself.
And that radical solution was something called lossy compression. It was brutal. Engineers created these algorithms called codecs, which were basically designed to just throw data away. We're talking stripping out color information, slicing off high-frequency sounds you might not notice, even dropping entire frames from the video, all in a desperate attempt to shrink the file enough to fit through that digital straw.
So what did you get after all that digital butchery? You got this, the postage stamp video. These tiny 160 by 120 pixel windows of blurry, blocky, pixelated motion. Honestly, it often looked more like a flipbook than a real video. But you have to believe me. At the time, it felt like absolute magic. So, who was the first to really master this dark art of compression? Well, one company stepped up to the plate and introduced the world to an entirely new way of thinking about media. And that company was Real Networks.
They just exploded onto the scene in 1995 with Real Audio. And by 1997, their software, Real Player, was absolutely everywhere. It powered that first big wave of internet radio stations and pretty much became the default way you experienced any kind of media online. See, what Real Networks really popularized was the very idea of streaming. Think about it. Before them, if you wanted to listen to a 1-minute sound clip, you might have to download it for 10 minutes first. Streaming flipped that script completely. You could click play and the audio would start almost instantly as the data trickled in. It was a game changer. Of course, there was a catch. And that catch can be summed up in one single, soul-crushing word: buffering. On those shaky dial-up connections, the player would constantly have to pause to build up a little cushion of data, a buffer, to protect against interruptions. It was this necessary evil that led to a universally frustrating waiting game. Now, this early, clunky success did not go unnoticed. It attracted the attention of a sleeping giant. And that kicked off a fierce, all-out war for control over the future of media on the internet. So in one corner, you had Real Networks, the scrappy innovator with the early lead, the better tech. And in the other corner, you had Microsoft, which decided to use its ultimate weapon, the Windows operating system. By bundling its own Windows media player directly into Windows 98, they basically put their software on every new computer on the planet instantly. But wait, it wasn't just a two-horse race. You can't forget about Apple. Their QuickTime player was a huge deal. They carved out this crucial niche by focusing on higher quality, which made them the favorite for creative professionals, and, maybe most famously, for movie trailers. If you waited hours to download the first trailer for Star Wars Episode 1, you did it on QuickTime. And for us, the actual users, oh man, this war was a total mess. Your desktop was cluttered with 3 or 4 different media players because you never knew what a website was going to demand. You were constantly dealing with competing software updates, and the players were always fighting in the background, trying to make themselves the default for every video and audio file on your computer. It was chaos. Okay, so while the software giants were busy battling over formats, a whole different fight was brewing. Entrepreneurs were trying to ask a very simple question. Can we actually build a real business on top of this shaky tech? And this is where Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner come in with just a deceptively brilliant idea. They realized that live video was almost impossible, but live audio? That was totally doable. So they created broadcast.com to bring radio stations online, and they focused on a killer app, letting you listen to your hometown sports team's radio broadcast from anywhere on Earth. And that brilliantly simple idea led to this staggering number. In 1999, right at the absolute peak of the dot-com insanity, Yahoo bought broadcast.com for $5.7 billion in stock. It was just an unbelievable, monumental bet on the future of internet broadcasting. But here's the thing. The bet completely failed. And the reason why is that the basic economics were just broken. Every time a new person tuned in, it actually cost broadcast.com more money in bandwidth. Plus, the low quality of the streams made it really hard to sell ads. The vision was there, but the technology just wasn't ready. A few years later, in 2002, Yahoo quietly shut the whole thing down. So you hear all that, the pixelated videos, the corporate brawls, the failed billion-dollar bets, and you might think it was all just a big waste of time and money. But it wasn't. Not at all. In fact, it was all completely necessary. You know, the story of broadcast.com is really the story of that whole era. It's the perfect example of having the right idea at exactly the wrong time. They could see the future crystal clear, but the infrastructure, the actual pipes of the internet, just couldn't support that vision yet. But all of those painful lessons about compression, about buffering, about user experience, and about broken business models, they weren't lost. They formed the critical foundation, the blueprint that the next generation of companies would use. Think about it. YouTube was founded in 2005, Spotify in 2006. They built their empires on the lessons learned from these earlier struggles, right as broadband was finally becoming a thing. You know, before we had endless scrolling and instant streaming, our entire digital world was actually built on a bridge. And that bridge? It was a humble red envelope carrying a thin plastic disc. So let's dive into how this simple piece of physical mail didn't just deliver movies, it delivered the future. I want you to think back for a second. Remember that sinking feeling in your stomach when you realized you forgot to return a movie? That mad dash to the video store, praying you weren't a minute too late, all to avoid that one dreaded penalty, the late fee. It was this universal frustration, a pain point we all shared.
And then, in 1997, this new company called Netflix came along, and they decided to build their entire business around destroying that one single concept. Their weapon of choice wasn't some complex new software, but a brand new technology combined with a really old one, the DVD and the good old-fashioned postal service. So how on earth did they do it? Well, it all starts with the tech that suddenly made this whole war possible in the first place. And what's so wild is just how simple the difference was. VHS tapes, they were clunky, heavy, and that magnetic tape inside was super fragile. Trying to mail them would have been a total nightmare. But then comes the DVD, which, in a perfect stroke of timing, also launched in the US in 1997. It was a complete game changer. It was light, durable, and you could mail it for the cost of a single stamp. Plus, the quality was perfect every single time. This tiny disc unlocked a massive new way of doing business. Okay, so Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph get this thing started in 97. And at first it was a pretty straightforward competitor to Blockbuster. You'd go online, rent a movie, and they'd mail it to you. It was a cool idea for sure, but it wasn't the revolutionary idea. Oh no, that was just around the corner.
And that brings us to the big one, the subscription model. This is the innovation that truly changed everything.
So in 1999, Netflix rolls out this simple but absolutely brilliant method. You'd pay one flat fee every month, you'd go online and build this list, your queue, of all the movies you wanted to see. They'd send you the first one. You could watch it whenever you wanted, for as long as you wanted, no due dates, and, the most important part, no late fees. When you were done, you just popped it in the prepaid envelope, dropped it in a mailbox, and like magic, the next movie on your list would automatically get sent out. And you can see what a huge psychological shift this was, right? It took movie watching from a bunch of separate transactions, go to the store, pay, return, and turned it into this continuous, always-on service. Your queue was this list of future entertainment, and Netflix was just constantly delivering on it. This idea of an endless pipeline of content, that's the direct ancestor of the infinite scroll we have on every single streaming service today. But of course, as this new model starts picking up steam, it gets the attention of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And that leads to one of the most famous, or infamous, meetings in business history. Picture this. It's the year 2000. The Netflix founders fly down to Dallas to meet with Blockbuster's top brass. They propose a partnership. But Blockbuster, they just didn't get it. They looked at their thousands of physical stores and thought that was an unbeatable advantage. They saw this mail-in service as a tiny, little niche business that would never, ever be a serious threat. And the offer on the table that day? For Blockbuster to buy Netflix? For just $50 million. Blockbuster basically laughed them out of the room. I mean, what a truly staggering mistake. So why? Why would they say no? Well, it's a perfect textbook case of something called the innovator's dilemma. Blockbuster was a massively successful company, and you know where a huge chunk of its profit came from? Late fees. The very thing customers hated. They were so focused on squeezing every last dollar out of their current business model that they were completely blind to a new model that would destroy their biggest cash cow. So, after getting shut down like that, Netflix knew they had to go it alone. And the way they won wasn't just with a good idea, it was with this powerful, almost invisible engine running in the background. And I mean, just look at this growth. After they launched subscriptions in '99, it just exploded. They hit 1 million subscribers by 2003. By 2006, the company was profitable and just growing at this incredible rate. Blockbuster's massive mistake was getting clearer and clearer by the day. So what was the secret sauce? Part 1 was their ridiculously smart physical network. They strategically built dozens of distribution centers all over the country. This meant for most people, when you mailed a DVD back, they got it the next day, and your next movie was already on its way. This network was so efficient that it served as the perfect buffer, a totally reliable content delivery system, while internet speeds were still way too slow for streaming to actually work. Now let's talk about their other huge advantage. Think about a regular store, right? Like Blockbuster. You've only got so much shelf space. So what do? You fill it with a few hundred copies of the newest, biggest Hollywood hits. But when your store is a giant warehouse, your inventory is, for all intents and purposes, infinite. You can stock thousands of older movies, documentaries, foreign films, all the stuff a local video store could never afford to keep on hand. This is what people call the long tail. And Netflix built this amazing tool to take advantage of all that space, their recommendation algorithm, Cinematch. You'd rate movies, and Cinematch would learn what you liked and start recommending these hidden gems from that massive library. This was a double whammy of genius. First, it made customers way happier because they were discovering movies they'd actually love. And second, it brilliantly optimized Netflix's inventory, spreading demand across thousands of different titles instead of just a few new releases. This data-first mindset, that's the DNA of the Netflix we know today.
Okay, so you might be thinking, if digital was obviously the future, why didn't some other company just leapfrog the whole DVD in the mail thing? Well, the early attempts at digital show you exactly why that physical bridge was still so incredibly important. Let's just do a quick comparison around 2006. On one side, you've got the Netflix DVD experience. Simple, convenient, reliable, with this giant library at your fingertips. And on the other side, you have Amazon's attempt, called Amazon Unbox. Oof, it was a clunky mess. You had to download an entire movie file, which took hours. The branding was confusing, and the whole user experience was just a hassle. Yeah, it was digital, but it sure wasn't better. And that's really the key takeaway here, isn't it? Just being digital wasn't enough. To beat the incredible convenience of getting that red envelope in the mail, digital had to be just as easy, and even more importantly, it had to be instant. That little red envelope set an incredibly high bar for user experience that the early digital services just couldn't clear.
You know that 4K movie that just, poof, started instantly on your TV? Well, that's not magic. It's actually the result of this quiet but totally hard-fought war against one single, universal enemy of the internet, the buffering wheel. We're going to pull back the curtain on the incredible engineering that finally killed it for good.
Now, I'm serious, think about it for a second. When was the last time you actually saw that dreaded spinning circle of doom? It used to be this constant, infuriating part of just being online. And now, it's basically a museum piece. So what on earth changed? Well, the answer wasn't some single silver bullet. It was more like a revolution, fought on 3 different fronts all at once. First, they had to conquer the actual physical distance of the internet. Then they had to figure out how to tame the chaos of our own home connections. And finally, they had to break video free from the software prison that was holding it captive. To really, truly appreciate how good we have it now, we have to remember just how unbelievably painful online video used to be. I mean, the journey from those buffering nightmares to our current binge-watching paradise, it is seriously dramatic. Back in the early days of streaming, you'd wait minutes for a video the size of a postage stamp to load, only for it to freeze up every 10 seconds. It was awful. Today, we don't just want, we demand instant 4K on any screen we own. That leap didn't just happen by accident. It was a massive engineering effort to solve a few really fundamental problems. And let's start with the biggest one of all, simple physics. All right, so first up was the problem of physics. You see, the internet isn't some magical cloud floating in the sky. It's a very real network of networks. We're talking actual wires, undersea cables, and routers. And in that world, distance really, really matters. Every single byte of that movie you're watching has to physically travel from a server somewhere to your screen. So if that server is in, say, California and you're in London, that data is going on an epic transcontinental journey. And every single hop it makes from one network to another adds delay. That's what we call latency. And it creates another chance for data to get lost, which causes those annoying glitches in your stream. So in the old model, your little request would have to travel thousands of miles to some big central server. And then that server would have to send this massive video file all the way back. This insane cross-continental trip was slow, it was unreliable, and it was pretty much the main reason for those frustratingly long load times. The solution was just brilliant in how simple it was. Don't move the user to the data, move the data closer to the user. This is the Content Delivery Network, or CDN. Okay, think of it like this. Instead of having one giant factory in California, what if you built hundreds of local warehouses all over the world, and you pre-stocked them with the most popular stuff? So now, when our user in London clicks play, the CDN is smart enough to instantly find a copy of that video on a server that's maybe just a few miles away. The journey is short, it's fast. Companies like Akamai basically pioneered this, building what was essentially a private superhighway over the top of the regular old public internet. And the scale of this whole operation is it's staggering. Akamai went from just a few thousand servers around the turn of the millennium to over 200,000 by 2016. I mean, without this massive global infrastructure, the internet's backbone would have just completely collapsed under the weight of all this video traffic. Okay, so CDNs brought the data right to your doorstep. Fantastic. But what happens inside your house? Your own connection is kind of like a chaotic battlefield, right? The Wi-Fi signal gets weaker when you walk to the kitchen, or your bandwidth suddenly tanks because someone else in the house starts a video call. This instability, this was the second great enemy of smooth streaming. The original approach was just incredibly fragile. You were sent one single video file at one fixed quality. If your connection speed dipped even a little bit below what was needed to download that file in real time, boom, buffering wheel. The new method, adaptive bitrate, or ABR, is like a smart chameleon. It just adapts to its environment.
So here's how it works. Before you even press play, the video you want to watch has already been pre-packaged into multiple buckets. You've got a beautiful 1080p version, a really solid 7020 one, and maybe a lower quality 480p one. And then each of these versions is chopped up into these tiny 2 to 10 second chunks.
Your video player basically got a PhD in network management. It's constantly monitoring your connection speed. And for every single new chunk of video, it asks, hey, how's the internet looking right now? If it's great, awesome. It requests a chunk from the HD bucket. But if things get a little congested, it just seamlessly grabs the very next chunk from a lower quality bucket. The video never stops, it just adapts.
So the network was fast and the stream itself was smart, but there was one final bottleneck, and it was right there on your computer, the browser. For years and years, web video was held captive inside what you could call a plug-in prison. Oh, for a decade, to watch any video online, you needed a third-party plugin, like Adobe Flash or Microsoft Silverlight. And these things were just clunky, they were notorious for draining your laptop's battery, and they were a constant security nightmare, just filled with holes that hackers could exploit. Then, in 2010, Steve Jobs published this famous open letter, explaining exactly why Apple refused to allow Flash on the iPhone. He called it a battery hog with a terrible security record and said it was the #1 reason Macs crash. This was a huge turning point. It really signaled the beginning of the end for plugins.
And Jobs' stance, well, it kicked off a domino effect. The entire industry started rallying around a new web standard, HTML5, which could play video natively, right in the browser, no plugin required. Netflix made the big jump from Silverlight in 2013. And then finally, in 2020, Adobe pulled the plug on Flash for good. The plugin era was officially over.
So when you put all these different pieces together, the network, the smart player, the browser, you get the seamless experience we all have today. It wasn't just one thing. It was this coordinated attack on buffering from every possible angle.
And that's really it. That's the invisible revolution. It wasn't one single breakthrough, but 3 huge victories. CDNs conquered distance, bringing the data to our doorstep. Adaptive bitrate streaming tamed our unstable home connections. And HTML5 finally broke video free from its plug-in prison. Altogether, they turned a frustrating, annoying experience into something we don't even think about anymore.
You know, it's kind of wild to think about, but there really was a time before binge watching was even a word. A time when you actually had to plan what you were going to watch, and getting something instantly was pure science fiction.
I mean, for a lot of us, right? Watching a new movie at home meant one thing: running to the mailbox, looking for that iconic red Netflix envelope, and just praying the DVD inside wasn't scratched. The whole thing was built on waiting.
So the big question is, how on earth did we go from a physical disc in the mail to a world where entire seasons just appear at the click of a button? Well, that 5-year revolution is exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, so the first piece of the puzzle, it wasn't some flashy new app or a cool gadget. Nope. It was something way more fundamental. The infrastructure, the pipes themselves, finally had to be ready. See, by 2007, we hit this sort of magic number. About half, 50%, of all homes in the United States had a broadband internet connection. For the very first time ever, the pipe was actually big enough to reliably push video into millions and millions of homes. The stage was officially set. So the tech is finally there, right? And that's the Netflix makes its first big move. And what's so fascinating is that their first step into streaming wasn't really a tech revolution. It was a psychological one. So back on January 16th, 2007, Netflix quietly launches this thing called Watch Now. And it was super basic. It was a freebie for their DVD subscribers that had maybe 1,000 old movies. And get this, it only worked on a Windows PC, and you had to use Internet Explorer. I mean, come on. It was hardly a threat to Hollywood. But here's the thing. This was the real game changer. It wasn't about the movie selection or the video quality, not at first. The revolution was all about collapsing that gap, the time between wanting to watch something and actually watching it. That 24-hour wait for a DVD, suddenly it was just seconds. And that right there, changed absolutely everything. All right, but a streaming service is totally useless if there's nothing good to watch, right? So this brings Netflix to its next and maybe its biggest hurdle, getting their hands on some legitimate content. So just 1 year after launching that super basic streaming feature, Netflix makes a deal that would completely change the game. They team up with the premium cable channel Starz. And they did it for a reported $25 million. Now that might sound like a lot, but in hindsight, it was an absolute steal. It was the price they paid to basically secure the keys to the kingdom. So what exactly did that $25 million get them? Well, an incredible library of 2,500 movies, including huge blockbusters from giants like Sony and Disney. And you want to know the crazy part? The folks over at Starz, they saw this as found money. They thought streaming was this tiny little niche thing. They just couldn't imagine it would ever be a threat to their main cable business. They just didn't see Netflix as a real player.
Yeah, it's no surprise that industry analysts eventually called it, and I quote, the dumbest deal in Hollywood history. It gave Netflix this amazing, high-quality library for pennies on the dollar. And that just drove subscriber growth through the roof. It absolutely put them on the map.
So Netflix has a growing library. They've got more and more people signing up. And now they have a new problem. The industry they're shaking up, well, it's starting to fight back. And this forced Netflix to make its next big strategic move. So in 2008, a bunch of TV networks got together and launched a competitor, Hulu. But their game plans were polar opposites. Netflix, you had a subscription service, no ads, with a library of older movies. Their goal was to replace cable. Hulu, on the other hand, was free, it was full of ads, and it had current TV shows. Their goal was to just supplement cable. But see, Hulu's big problem was its structure. You had all these rival networks trying to work together, and it just slowed everything down. They even got the nickname Clown Co. for a while.
But Netflix got something really fundamental. They knew that to truly take over television, you couldn't just be stuck on a computer screen. No way. You had to win the battle for the main screen in everyone's house, the TV itself. And their strategy for winning the living room was basically this multi-front attack. First, they spun out an internal project that became Roku, the very first dedicated streaming box. Smart move. Then they got their app onto the millions of Xboxes and PlayStations already hooked up to TVs. And finally, they worked to get Netflix built right into smart TVs from the get-go. The goal was simple: be everywhere, make Netflix impossible to avoid.
So, what's the result of all this? By the end of this 5-year blitz, these moves had completely redrawn the map of the entire entertainment world. I mean, the transformation was just staggering. Think about it. In 2007, Netflix was basically a DVD company with this kind of clunky PC add-on. Fast forward to 2012, and it's a full-blown streaming giant, powerful enough to go head-to-head with the major networks for content. And what about that dumbest deal ever? Well, the final nail in the coffin was this. When the contract with Starz finally expired, Netflix didn't even need to renew it. They were so big by then that they could just bypass the middleman completely and start bidding for content directly from the studios. The student had absolutely become the master. In just 5 years, one company completely changed television as we know it. Yep, we're talking about Netflix. And this isn't just some boring business case study. It's a wild story of survival, of massive bets, and of a cultural shift that changed how all of us watch TV. So the big question is, how did they do it? How did the company that used to mail us DVDs in red envelopes manage to topple the giants of entertainment? Well, the answer isn't just about good tech. It's about a series of incredibly risky make-or-break gambles. You see, this whole story kicks off not with a grand vision, but with a desperate fight to stay alive. Netflix was literally backed into a corner, and their only way out was to make a bet so huge it would either save them or be the thing that finished them for good. Okay, so picture this. It's 2011. The big movie and TV studios, who were happily licensing their shows to Netflix, suddenly had this collective uh-oh moment. They realized they weren't just supplying a partner. They were basically arming their biggest future rival. So what did they do? They started jacking up their prices, putting Netflix in a really tough spot. This was the moment everything changed. The folks at Netflix looked at the situation and realized a simple, hard truth. You can't build a lasting business on content that you're just borrowing. The only real path forward was to completely transform the company from a place that rented shows to a studio that actually made them. So what followed was one of the boldest moves in modern business history. Instead of dipping a toe in the water, Netflix decided to bet the entire farm on one single show, a new American version of a British political drama called House of Cards. And when I say they bet the farm, I mean it. They slapped a staggering $100 million on the table to beat out heavy hitters like HBO. But here's the truly wild part. That money was for 2 full seasons, without even seeing a pilot episode. In Hollywood, that just didn't happen. It was unheard of. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a blind gamble. It was a calculated risk, all based on cold, hard data. Netflix dug into the viewing habits of its 33 million subscribers and found this perfect little overlap. They saw that a ton of people loved the original British House of Cards, were also big fans of the director David Fincher, and they watched a lot of Kevin Spacey movies. The data was practically screaming at them. This is a guaranteed hit. And you know what? The data was right. When House of Cards dropped, it became an instant cultural phenomenon. Critics loved it, audiences loved it. This was a massive moment. A streaming service had just proved it could make prestige TV that was just as good as, and maybe even better than, what the big guys at HBO were doing. But the Netflix revolution wasn't just about what we were watching. It was about how we were watching it. See, along with creating this hit show, they made another decision, one that would completely break decades of TV tradition. They dropped all 13 episodes at once, and just like that, they unleashed binge watching on the world. I mean, sure, the term existed before, but its use exploded in 2013. By 2015, it was Collins Dictionary's word of the year. This wasn't just a feature, it was them literally rewiring our relationship with television. And there's a real science to why this is so addictive. You know the feeling, right? An episode ends on a huge cliffhanger, your brain is dying for that resolution, and then, boom, the autoplay feature kicks in before you can even reach for the remote. That whole cycle, tension, effortless continuation, and then the reward of the next episode, it creates a dopamine loop in your brain that just keeps you saying, okay, just one more. And this right here shows just how much the culture changed. We went from the old way, everybody talking about the same episode at the water cooler on Monday morning, to the new way, a culture built around avoiding spoilers. TV went from being this shared weekly event to something totally personal, where everyone is on their own schedule. So at this point, Netflix had pretty much conquered the American living room. But growth in the US was starting to slow down. To keep the momentum going, they had to think bigger. Way bigger. And they didn't just expand, they exploded. In one of the most audacious business moves ever, on January 6, 2016, they flipped a switch and went live in 130 new countries at the same time. Overnight, they went from being mostly an American company to a true global entertainment empire. Their CEO, Reed Hastings, knew exactly how big of a deal this was. He got on stage at a big tech conference and basically told the world, you're not just watching a company expand, you're seeing the birth of something entirely new. Now, the strategy behind this move was just brilliant. First, it solved their growth problem. Second, it meant they could spread the insane cost of making their original shows over a much, much larger group of subscribers. And third, it led them to invest in awesome local shows from around the world, creating a library of content that their American rivals just couldn't compete with. But even as Netflix was planting its flag all over the globe, a new and very different kind of competitor was emerging from the shadows. A rival that wasn't just playing by different rules, they were playing a completely different game. We're talking about Amazon. And this slide really breaks it down. For Netflix, streaming is the business. It has to make a profit all by itself. But for Amazon, streaming is just a perk. It's a shiny object they use to make their Prime membership more valuable. They're not really trying to make money from video, they're using video to make money on everything else. This is what's known as the flywheel effect. Amazon pours money into making incredible award-winning shows. Why? Not to make a profit from your subscription, but to get you hooked on Amazon Prime. Because once you're a Prime member, you're way more likely to buy everything from them. Books, batteries, you name it. The amazing TV show is really just clever marketing for their giant online store.
For the longest time, streaming was pretty simple, right? But then it felt like almost overnight, a war kicked off. A really high-stakes battle, not just for our subscription dollars, but for the entire future of entertainment.
So this is the story of how our TV screens got so darn complicated.
I mean, just think back to 2015. Watching your favorite shows was probably a breeze. Everything was pretty much in one place. Fast forward to 2020, and that exact same watch list is now scattered across, what, 5 different services? This didn't just happen. To really get it, we have to go back to the moment the media giants decided to stop playing nice with their competition.
You see, it all kicked off with one simple, really powerful idea. For years, massive companies like Disney and Warner Bros. Were totally fine licensing their biggest shows and movies to Netflix. It was easy money. But as we headed towards the end of the 2010s, they had a change of heart. They decided, you know what, it's time to take our stuff back and build our own kingdoms.
And this whole strategy actually has a name. It's called content reclamation. Now, this wasn't just about pulling a show off a competitor's platform. For these media giants, it was a move to, well, reclaim what they felt was rightfully theirs all along. They were going to use their own classic libraries to build brand new streaming destinations from scratch.
And if you want the poster child for this whole thing, look no further than the absolute classic, The Office. For years, this show was a monster on Netflix. I mean, it was consistently their #1 most watched show. It was the ultimate comfort binge, a total cornerstone of their service.
But then, bam! NBC Universal, the company that actually owns the show, made its move. They reclaimed The Office to be the big, flashy flagship title for their own new service, Peacock. For millions and millions of Netflix subscribers, this was basically the first real shot fired in the streaming wars. And The Office leaving? That wasn't just a one-off thing. Oh no, this strategy was catching on like wildfire. Pretty soon, another cultural phenomenon, a sitcom that basically defined a generation and then found a whole new one on streaming, was also packing its bags. That's right, we're talking about Friends. It was reclaimed by Warner Bros. To be one of the crown jewels for their super ambitious new platform, HBO Max. The great unbundling was officially underway and the battlefield was set. So with all this classic content being pulled back left and right, the stage was set for some new challengers, and the very first one to step into the ring came armed to the teeth with an incredible library and a strategy that was planned down to the last detail.
Disney Plus was the first one out of the gate, launching in November 2019 and getting a huge head start. HBO Max came along about 6 months later in May 2020, right when the whole world was changing. But that initial launch from Disney, wow, it was something else.
10 million. Let that sink in. That's how many people signed up for Disney Plus on its first day. This wasn't just a successful launch, it was a massive statement. It sent total shockwaves through the industry. So how in the world did they pull that off?
Well, they did it with an unbelievably clear pitch. You weren't just subscribing to some random library of stuff. You were buying a key to entire beloved universes. Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, honestly, each one of those alone was a powerful enough reason for a lot of people to sign up.
But here's where they got really smart. They also changed up the release model. While Netflix basically invented the binge drop, dropping a whole season at once, Disney went old school. They did a weekly release for hit shows like The Mandalorian. And this strategy was genius. It was all about reducing churn. You couldn't just sign up, binge the whole season in a weekend, and then cancel. Nope, you had to stay subscribed for months to see how the story ended.
So, while Disney's launch was this picture of perfect planning, Warner Media's entry into the war with HBO Max was, well, it was a lot more chaotic. And a global crisis forced their hand, making them take one of the biggest and most controversial gambles in modern Hollywood.
The plan was called Project Popcorn. With movie theaters all over the world shut down because of the pandemic, Warner Bros. Announced something absolutely radical. Their entire 2021 lineup of huge movies would be released on HBO Max the exact same day they were supposed to hit theaters. And we're not talking about small indie films here. This was the big stuff. We're talking about massive blockbusters like Dune and The Matrix Resurrections. It was a completely unprecedented move, and it was all about one thing: driving subscriber growth, no matter the cost.
And while it definitely got people to subscribe, it also created an absolute firestorm in the creative community. Really famous directors, guys like Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve, publicly ripped the studio apart. They felt that their art, which was made for the big screen, was just being used as a cheap marketing gimmick for a streaming service. This was a huge breach of trust, and it created problems that would take years to fix.
So after all the corporate chess moves, the big gambles, and all the content being reclaimed, where did that leave us? Well, it left all of us in a brand new and way more fragmented world. This right here, this was the new reality for all of us. To get the same shows and movies you once had on just one service, you now needed a whole bunch of separate subscriptions. The simple act of figuring out what to watch at night suddenly meant juggling multiple apps and a growing list of monthly bills. The great unbundling was complete.
And for the studios, the results were a really complicated trade-off. On one hand, the big win. They got that massive subscriber growth that made Wall Street happy. But the costs were huge. They completely cannibalized their own box office money, and like we saw with Warner Bros., they seriously damaged the relationships with the very talent they needed to make the content. It was a short-term win that came with some pretty serious long-term consequences.
Have you ever been scrolling through your streaming service and it just hits you? This looks a lot like the old cable TV I was trying to get away from. Well, if you've had that thought, you are definitely not alone. The entire streaming world is going through a massive midlife crisis, and it's changing everything about how we watch TV.
I mean, it's the question on everyone's mind, right? Why are there suddenly commercials on my streaming service? We all cut the cord specifically to escape ads. So why are they popping up on Netflix, on Disney Plus, and pretty much everywhere else? The answer, it turns out, is a lot bigger than just ads. It's about a fundamental shift in the entire business of entertainment. So to really understand how we got here, we've got to rewind the clock a little bit. Back to the glory days of streaming. You know, that amazing time of endless content and zero commercials. Because as we're about to see, that party was never going to last forever. For a while there, it was a total gold rush. I mean, every single media company, big or small, was launching its own streaming service. They were throwing billions with a B, at new shows, all just desperately trying to sign up as many of us as they possibly could. But by 2022, yeah, the rocket fuel started to run out. The problem, when you boil it down, was actually pretty simple. We hit a ceiling. There were just too many services out there, all fighting for a piece of our wallets. And that led to a feeling I'm sure you've had, subscription fatigue. You know that moment you look at your credit card bill and realize, wait a second, I'm paying for 5, 6, 7 different services? I haven't even opened half of these this month. And so, what happened next? Well, viewers started fighting back with the most powerful tool in their arsenal, the cancel button. And let me tell you, the way people started clicking it sent absolute shockwaves through the entire industry. 31%. Just let that number sink in for a second. In the last year, nearly a third of all streaming subscribers canceled at least one of their services. Now, this wasn't just a few people changing their minds. This was a mass exodus, and it was threatening the very foundation of the streaming business. In the streaming world, this is called churn, and it is a company's absolute biggest fear. I want you to imagine trying to fill a bucket that has a giant hole in the bottom. No matter how many new customers you pour in the top, you're constantly losing them out the bottom. That is exactly what a high churn rate feels like for these businesses. So where were all these subscribers going? Well, they became service hoppers. Come on, you know the move. You sign up for a service, you binge watch that one show everyone's talking about, and then, poof, you cancel right before the next bill is due. It's a brilliant move for your wallet for sure, but it is a total nightmare for companies that need you to stick around month after month. So how did the streaming giants fight back against all these service hoppers and the cancel culture they created? They went back in time, and they resurrected the one thing we all thought we had finally escaped. You guessed it, commercials. The very, very thing that streaming was supposed to save us from became its salvation. I know, it was a shocking U-turn. But as we're about to see, the math behind it is surprisingly simple and incredibly powerful. And this wasn't some slow, gradual transition. It was like a switch was flipped. In late 2022, the floodgates just opened. Netflix launched its ad-supported plan. Then, just weeks later, Disney Plus did the exact same thing. Suddenly, the two biggest names in streaming were all in on ads, and the rest of the industry scrambled to follow suit. But wait, I know exactly what you're thinking. How can a cheaper plan with ads possibly make more money than a more expensive one without them? It sounds completely backward, I get it, but it's true. And right now, we're going to show you the secret math that turned the entire streaming industry on its head. Okay, think about it this way. With your regular ad-free subscription, you pay a higher price, and that's the only money the company makes from you. Simple. But with an ad-supported plan, you pay a lower price, and the company also gets paid by advertisers every time you watch a commercial. They get to double dip. This all comes down to one key number, a little piece of industry jargon called ARPU.
That stands for average revenue per user. And really, it's just a fancy way of asking, when you add everything up, how much money are we really making from each and every subscriber? And here's where it all clicks into place. Just look at this. The first bar shows how much money a company makes from a regular ad-free subscriber. But this second bar over here, the one that combines the lower subscription fee with all that ad revenue, it's actually taller. That's the big secret. They are making more money from you on the cheaper ad-supported plan. So what does this all really mean? Well, it means the revolution is over. Streaming is no longer the scrappy underdog that's changing the world. Nope. It's the new establishment. It's the new cable TV, just delivered with a different kind of remote. Okay, so if streaming is the new cable, what's next? Well, get ready to fire up the DeLorean because it looks like we're all going back to the future with something called the Great Rebundling. Does this sound familiar at all? All those different streaming apps you have to juggle, they're slowly being herded together into these neat little packages by the same kinds of big companies that used to sell you cable. It really feels like we're ending up right back where we started, doesn't it? With just a few powerful companies controlling everything we watch. And you have definitely seen this in action. The Disney bundle is the perfect example, right? Why pay for Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus separately when you can just get them all together for one price? It's convenient, it's easy, and it is the future of streaming. So here it is, the entire story in 3 simple acts. First, we have the original cable bundle, all our channels in one package. Then we cut the cord. That was the great unbundling, embracing the freedom of individual streaming apps. And now, we've arrived right back where we started, with all those apps being bundled together again.
If you've got this feeling that your streaming subscriptions are just a chaotic and expensive mess lately, well, you're not wrong. It's late 2025, and the streaming wars we all thought we knew, they're over. A completely new battle has started. So today, we're going to break down the new rules, the new strategies, and what this all means for your wallet.
And really, it all boils down to this one single kind of brutal shift. For years, right, companies like Netflix and Disney were in this massive land grab, just spending billions to get as many of us to subscribe as possible. And Wall Street, they loved it. But now, that party is over. Investors are demanding profit, and this quote right here, this is the new rulebook for every single streaming service out there.
And the most immediate thing we're all feeling from that new rule is something people are calling streamflation. No, it is not just your imagination. The cost of streaming has absolutely exploded. And it's the #1 thing hitting all of us right where it hurts the most, our bank accounts. So yeah, how did we even get here?
To really get it, we have to start at the very top, on the first front of this new war, the corporate boardroom. I mean, this is where these billion-dollar strategies are being cooked up under some really intense pressure.
So what's happening is the industry has basically split into 2 totally different camps. In one corner, you have the titans. Think Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus. They're huge. Their whole strategy is to dig in their heels, to entrench their power by expanding into things like gaming and shopping, to make themselves totally essential to your life. Then, in the other corner, you've got the challengers, like Warner Bros. Discovery and Paramount. For them, this is a game of survival. They're looking to merge, sell off pieces, pretty much do whatever it takes to stay in the fight.
So here's the most important thing to understand. The scoreboard has completely changed. It's not about who has the most subscribers anymore. Not at all. It's about who can generate the most actual cash from the subscribers they already have. Your monthly payment is now a data point on an earnings call, all to prove to Wall Street that this business model actually works.
And all that pressure from Wall Street, it flows directly downstream to the second front of this war, the one that's being fought every single month over your household budget.
Just look at this number. In the last year alone, prices for the big services have shot up by about 25%. And this isn't some slow, gradual increase. It's a massive shock to the system. And it's a direct result of that big pivot to profitability.
Which brings us to what's really happening in our bank accounts. The average US household is now forking over almost $50 a month just for streaming. I mean, think about that. That's starting to get into utility bill territory, and it's definitely pushing people toward a breaking point.
And the data totally backs us up. According to Deloitte, almost half of us now feel like we're overpaying. There's this growing sense that the value just isn't quite there anymore. And that's creating some real friction between the platforms and us, their audience.
So what's our response to all this? Well, that brings us to our main weapon in this new war. As the prices go up, we've gotten a lot smarter and, honestly, a lot more ruthless with the most powerful tool we have, that little cancel button. And you can see the impact right here. Back in 2019, we were pretty loyal. The monthly churn rate, that's just the fancy term for the percentage of people canceling, was a steady 2%. Today, it's skyrocketed to 5.5%. For these companies, that level of volatility is an absolute nightmare. The stability they used to take for granted, it's just gone.
So who's leading this little rebellion? It's a group that analysts have started calling serial churners. And as you can see, they now make up almost a quarter of the entire streaming audience. These are people who have zero brand loyalty. They follow the hot new show, not the platform.
And this is what their journey looks like. They basically treat streaming services like on-demand rentals. They'll sign up for Max just to binge the new season of House of the Dragon, and as soon as it's over, they cancel. Then they'll jump to Peacock for football season, cancel that, and hop over to Apple for whatever the next big prestige drama is. It's smart, it saves money, and it's forcing the entire industry to completely rethink how they do business.
So, how are the platforms fighting back? I mean, they're not just going to sit there and watch us all leave, right? They're now actively building moats around their services to make canceling harder, or, at the very least, less appealing.
They call these things retention hooks. You've seen them. Stuff like bundling Disney Plus and Hulu together to make the combined value feel too good to give up, or adding daily habit-forming stuff like news and live sports so you have a reason to log in every single day. And of course, the classic, offering big discounts if you'll just commit to paying for a whole year up front. It's all designed to make you hesitate.
But without a doubt, the single biggest strategic pivot has been the universal embrace of advertising. That dream we all had of a perfect ad-free streaming future, it's officially dead. The new model is all about giving you a choice. You can pay more for no ads, or you can pay less and, well, watch some commercials.
And we are taking that deal in huge numbers. This chart for Disney Plus is just staggering. In 2022, only 3% of their subscribers were on an ad-supported plan. This year, it's expected to hit 40%. That is a monumental shift in how we watch TV, and it's happened in just a couple of years.
And it is not just Disney. I mean, look at Netflix, the company that basically pioneered the whole ad-free idea. Today, an incredible 45% of its US households have chosen the cheaper plan with ads. This isn't some niche option anymore. For nearly half the user base, it's the new, normal way to watch Netflix.
Okay, so after all this chaos, the price hikes, the constant canceling, the return of ads, where does that leave us? Well, it seems we've reached a kind of new, maybe a little tense equilibrium. A whole new streaming reality.
This table really sums it all up perfectly. The way they measure success has shifted from pure growth to pure profit. Prices have gone from low and tempting to high, designed to maximize revenue. Our power, as consumers, has gone from being kind of locked in to having this total freedom to subscribe and cancel. And a whole business model has changed from just subscription to a hybrid of subscriptions and ads. This is the new world.
You know, for the longest time, the answer to this was super simple, right? It was just whoever has the most subscribers. But honestly, that's ancient history now. In 2025, the whole battlefield is completely different. Those old metrics, they just don't cut it. The real winners are playing a much bigger and way more profitable game.
Okay, so the one word you need to know to understand what's happening is bifurcation. It's a fancy way of saying the market has literally split right down the middle. On one side, you've got the titans. These are the giants, the big dogs who figured out how to build these massive, profitable empires. And then, well, then there's everyone else. We're calling them the challengers, and they are in a bare-knuckle brawl just to survive, get bigger, or get bought out.
So let's dive into that top tier, right? Inside the Titans Fortress. These are the companies that have cracked the code. They've figured out how to turn our eyeballs into some serious cash.
And first up, of course, is Netflix. Now, to really get why they're so dominant, you just need to look at this one number, 28.2%. So what is that? That's their operating margin. It basically means for every dollar that comes in, they're making over 28 cents in profit. Think about that. While everyone else was just burning through billions trying to catch up, Netflix was quietly building a cash-generating machine. And that firepower? It means they can pay for their own ridiculously huge content budget without breaking a sweat. That is a game-changing advantage right there.
So how'd they pull that off? How did they build this cash machine? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is right here. Remember when everyone, and I mean everyone, lost their minds over the idea of ads on Netflix? Well, guess what? That ad-supported plan is now their single biggest growth engine. It makes up a massive 45% of all their US subscribers. They've managed to grab millions of people who are watching their wallets and who probably would have just canceled otherwise.
And to make sure all those people stick around, Netflix is turning their platform into an event. I'm talking about their move into live sports. Snagging 2 exclusive NFL games on Christmas Day, that's not just a smart move, it's a tactical masterstroke. They're guaranteed a giant captive audience right when everyone's at home, making the service feel totally essential. It gives millions of people a really good reason not to hit that cancel button come January. Okay, let's shift gears to our next titan, Amazon. And their story kicks off with a number that's kind of hard to even wrap your head around. 210 million. That's how many people are estimated to be using Prime Video globally. The scale is just immense. But here's the thing, their strategy is totally different from Netflix. For Amazon, streaming has never been just about streaming. See, Prime Video's main job was always to be a juicy perk that kept you subscribed to Amazon Prime. But now? Oh man, just look at this. By doing one simple, kind of sneaky thing, turning on ads by default for everybody, they instantly became an advertising juggernaut. We're talking over $8 billion in ad revenue this year alone. That's more money than some of their rivals make from their entire streaming business.
And this is where Amazon's real superpower kicks in. It's something called T-commerce, or television commerce. They're rolling out these shop-to-show features that literally let you buy something you see on screen right then and there with your remote. They're connecting watching and shopping in a way that, let's be honest, nobody else can even touch.
All right, Titan number 3, Disney. For what felt like forever, the only story about Disney Plus was how much money it was hemorrhaging. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. Well, that narrative has completely flipped. Check out this number, $1.3 billion. That's not a loss. That's their projected income for the year from streaming. It is one of the biggest turnarounds this industry has ever seen, and it proves their big, painful strategy is finally working.
So what's next for them? How do they keep this momentum going? 2 big things. First, they're pulling all of Hulu's content right into the Disney Plus app. That makes the whole thing stickier, right? It keeps you watching longer. And second, they're making a huge bet on the future, investing $1.5 billion in Epic Games, the folks behind Fortnite. The goal? To build this massive, persistent universe where streaming and gaming all blend together. It's a huge play to capture the next generation of viewers. Or should I say, users. Okay, so that's life at the top. But what about everyone else? What's happening outside the fortress walls? Let's talk about the second group, the challengers. For these guys, the story is way different. It's not about world domination, it's about pure survival. The mantra is simple: get bigger or get bought.
And a perfect example is Warner Bros. Discovery. Here's the crazy part. Their streaming service, Max, actually makes money. It's profitable. But the parent company is drowning in a mountain of debt left over from that big merger. So you've got this weird situation where one part is healthy, but the whole thing is sick. And that makes them super vulnerable. Probably the #1 most talked about buyout target in all of Hollywood.
And believe me, there is a line of suitors forming. You've got the new Paramount Skydance combo, and they apparently want the whole shebang. But then you've got the real heavyweights like Comcast and even Netflix, who are supposedly circling like sharks, just waiting to cherry-pick the best parts. You know, the legendary Warner Brothers Studio and the Max streaming service.
And this whole situation, this potential bidding war, it just shines a huge spotlight on the big problem facing all the old-school media companies. The plan that's being kicked around is to literally carve the company in 2. On one side, you put all the good stuff, the growing stuff, the studio, the streaming. And on the other side, you'll lump together the declining cable networks like TNT and CNN. They still make money, sure, but in today's market, they're seen as, well, toxic to a company's value on Wall Street.
Now, let's talk about another challenger, Peacock. Take a look at this number, 41 million. That's their paid subscriber count. Now, it sounds like a lot, but when you put it up against the hundreds of millions the Titans have, yeah, it's clear they are not in the same weight class. They can't win a head-to-head fight, so they have to play a much, much smarter game.
And their whole strategy is bundling. It's brilliant, really. They've basically admitted, hey, maybe we're not the one service you have to have. So Comcast launched something called StreamSaver. It's a super bundle that packs Peacock in with giants like Netflix and Apple TV Plus for a pretty sweet discount. The logic is pure: if you can't beat them, join them. If you can't be the main destination, you become an absolutely essential part of the package.
And finally, we've got the newest player in the challenger camp, the recently merged Paramount Skydance. Their entire existence, their whole strategy, is built on one simple, terrifying belief. In a world where you're competing against trillion-dollar tech companies, you have 2 choices. You either get bigger or you get eaten. That's it. So their aggressive move to try and buy Warner Bros. Discovery, that's them going all in, betting the farm on getting big enough to survive.
Okay, so we've talked about all this high-stakes corporate drama, right? Mergers, debt, strategies. But what does any of this actually mean for you, for us? You know, the people actually sitting on the couch? How is this going to change what we watch and how we watch it? All right, let's break it down. Here are the big takeaways for your screen. First off, ads. Get used to them. They are here to stay, and they're the new engine powering this whole thing. Second, live sports. They're not a bonus anymore. They are a must-have weapon to stop you from canceling. Third, remember when everything was separate? Well, the great unbundling is over. Bundles are back in a big way to give you a better deal. And last but not least, this game of musical chairs, it's not over. Expect to see even more mergers as the last few challengers scramble for a seat at the big kids table.
You know, if you feel like the world of streaming TV has been completely turned on its head lately, you're not wrong. We are right in the middle of a huge industry-wide reset. So we're going to break down exactly what's going on and why your watch list is about to look very, very different.
It really all kicks off with a feeling I bet you know all too well. You're scrolling through, half a dozen paid streaming apps, wondering if you actually need all of them, and then it hits you, that subscription fatigue. Well, that feeling, that's the spark that's lighting this entire revolution.
And look, this quote right here, it just says it all. The old way of doing things, where every single service tried to bury you under a mountain of brand new, exclusive shows, that's officially over. The rules of the streaming game have been completely thrown out the window.
So, if the old model's broken, what's taking its place? Well, meet the new giants in town, FAST services. That stands for free ad-supported streaming TV, and they've basically become this safety valve for both viewers like us who are just overwhelmed and for studios that are trying to watch their budgets.
To really get a sense of how big this shift is, all you have to do is look at Tubi. I mean, it's been the breakout star, just rocketing past 100 million monthly active users. And it became this massive player by doing something simple, offering a gigantic library for free without any of the pressure to make those super expensive prestige originals.
And it is not just Tubi. The Roku channel, which is baked right into the software on all their devices, now reaches an estimated 120 million people in US households. I mean, come on, that's the kind of reach a major broadcast network would kill for. And make no mistake, this is not some small, niche corner of the market. This is a financial earthquake. Global revenue from FAST is projected to hit a staggering $17 billion by 2029. That kind of money doesn't just tweak a few things, it completely reshapes the entire media landscape.
So how is this really different from what we're all used to? Well, with something like Netflix, that's SVOD. You pay money to actively choose what you're going to watch. It's what we call a lean-forward experience. FAST is the total opposite. It's a lean-back experience, a lot more like old-school channel surfing. You just turn it on, let it play, and it's totally free.
The real secret to all of FAST's success is a pretty simple psychological thing: comfort viewing, right? After a long day, you don't always want some complex, demanding new series. You just crave the safety and the familiarity of shows you already know and love. It's low stakes, and honestly, it's just relaxing.
And this is how they deliver that comfort, with something called the single IP channel. Now, IP just means a single show or a franchise. So these FAST platforms have absolutely perfected creating channels that play nothing but, say, Top Gear or Baywatch or Project Runway 24 hours a day. It is the ultimate comfort food for your brain.
Okay, so that's the viewer side of the equation. But what about the studios? For these huge media companies, this whole shift has basically unlocked a treasure trove they've been sitting on for years, their own deep libraries of older shows.
And here's the proof. This is the smoking gun data that shows why studios are changing their strategy. As you can see, back in late 2022, original content made up a majority of what people watched, at 56%. But just a couple years later, that number plummeted to 40%. The message from viewers was loud and clear. They were choosing familiar library shows over brand new originals.
So what makes these old shows so powerful? While a splashy original might get someone to subscribe, it's that deep library that actually makes them stay. Shows with hundreds of super rewatchable episodes, like Grey's Anatomy, often pull in way more viewing hours than even a massive hit like Stranger Things. It's all about keeping people around.
The big writers and actors strikes in 2023 basically threw gasoline on this fire. With all production shut down, studios had no choice but to rely on their libraries. And coming out of those strikes, they adopted a whole new mantra: quality over quantity.
The days of trying to make everything for everyone were over. So what are they making now? Well, they're focusing on much safer bets. We're talking about big franchises that already have a built-in audience, cheaper, unscripted stuff like reality shows, and just buying shows from other countries to fill up the pipeline. This new reality has led to one of the weirdest and honestly most fascinating shifts of all. Studios that used to hoard all their own content are now actively selling it to their biggest rivals. The old battle lines have been completely erased.
The industry actually has a name for this. They call it the arms dealer approach. Studios are figuring out it can be way more profitable to just sell their weapons, their hit shows, to the highest bidder, even if that bidder is a competitor like Netflix. At the end of the day, it's all about making money.
And here's why it's such a brilliant move. It's a phenomenon called the Netflix effect. Just think about the show Suits. It was a pretty solid cable hit, right? But when the studio licensed it to Netflix, a whole new generation discovered it, and it became one of the most streamed shows of the year. The show's brand was totally revitalized, and the original studio could then cash in on all that new interest. It's a total win-win.
So what it all comes down to is that these two big trends are just feeding each other. The studios desperately need a profitable home for their massive back catalogs, and at the same time, the fast platforms have this endless need for content to fill up their free channels. It's a perfect, symbiotic relationship that's remaking the entire industry.
Okay, so let's bring this all back home. What does all this industry chaos actually mean for you, the viewer, when you fire up your TV tonight?
Well, here's your new reality. First, you're going to see way more free ad-supported options out there. Second, you'll probably see fewer of those risky, niche shows and a whole lot more big franchises and reboots. And finally, don't be shocked when one of your favorite old shows suddenly pops up on a rival service. Welcome to the Great Reset.
Why in the world would Netflix, the company that basically killed appointment TV, suddenly fork over a fortune for live NFL games on Christmas Day? I mean, it seems totally backward, right? But it's actually a brilliant strategic move.
And if you want to know why, you just have to look at this number. We are talking about an expected audience of 24 million people for one game. That's basically a Super Bowl-sized audience just dropping into their laps during the holidays. The scale here is it's immense. And it shows you how much these companies now value those can't-miss live events. A move like this, it signals a huge shift in the streaming wars. We are now officially in an era with new rules for attention. You see, it's not enough anymore for you to just press play and zone out. The real goal for these platforms in 2025 is to get your active, guaranteed engagement.
And that's the key right there. The most valuable prize in media today isn't just getting you to subscribe. It's stopping you from leaving. The whole game is about fighting what they call churn. You know, that thing we all do where we sign up for one show and then cancel right after. So how do you make your service feel indispensable? Well, you get the stuff people have to watch.
Which of course leads us straight to the first major battleground, live sports. Think about it. This is the last true fortress of appointment viewing. It's the one thing that can still get millions of people to watch the exact same thing at the exact same time. It's the ultimate weapon for keeping subscribers locked in.
And this change is happening so fast. I mean, look at this. In just 4 years, the number of people in the US streaming sports every month has just exploded, from 57 million to a projected 90 million by 2025. The audience isn't just migrating to streaming, it feels more like a stampede.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. The entire sports landscape is now completely carved up. If you want to follow the NFL, you're going to need Netflix for those Christmas games, Amazon for Thursday nights, and Peacock for a key late-season game. Love the NBA? Well, you'll need Amazon for a big chunk of regular season games and Peacock for another set of national games. It's a deliberately fragmented map designed to make you subscribe to everything.
So here's the strategy in a nutshell. By owning the exclusive rights to these must-see games, streamers create what the industry calls a retention floor. It means if you're a fan, you simply have to subscribe to watch your team play. And that makes it way less likely you'll cancel during the season. Your subscription becomes non-negotiable.
But here's the thing, live sports is only one piece of this puzzle. The second huge shift we're seeing is the pivot to gaming. You see, those early experiments in interactive TV didn't really pan out, so now these companies are betting big that the real future of engagement is in games. Hey, remember those choose-your-own-adventure shows like Black Mirror Bandersnatch? Well, that whole model has pretty much been abandoned. In fact, Netflix quietly phased out most of that stuff by the end of 2025.
The new focus isn't on making you pick a story branch, it's on the deep, repeatable engagement that you can only really get from gaming and, believe it or not, commerce.
And is the pivot working? Oh, yeah. Netflix has already rocked up over 210 million downloads for its mobile games. By including massive titles like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas right in your subscription, they're not just giving you a movie, they're giving you a reason to spend hours and hours inside their app, which makes it way more valuable and way stickier.
Okay, now this is where things get really futuristic. Disney is pouring $1.5 billion into Epic Games to build what's called a persistent universe connected to Fortnite. This is a massive play for Gen Alpha, kids born after 2010. There's the next generation of consumers, and they value interaction way more than passive watching. They don't just want to watch Disney characters, they want to be them. And that brings us to the final frontier in this whole scramble, and maybe the most transformative one. If you can't hold a viewer's attention with a big game or a video game, well, maybe you can with a shopping cart. The screen you're watching is literally becoming a storefront.
And, nobody is better positioned for this than Amazon. They've created this perfect commerce loop. You're watching a show on Prime Video, you see a cool jacket or a lamp you like, and with just a click, when you pause, you can add it directly to your Amazon cart. It completely closes the gap between seeing something you want and buying it. It's instant.
And don't think this is just some little experiment they're trying out. Amazon has already rolled this shoppable feature out to over 1,300 shows and movies. This is a core piece of their strategy. They're creating this fully integrated world of content and commerce that leverages their retail empire in a way that rivals like Netflix, well, they just can't copy it. It's their ultimate ace in the hole.
So, we've looked at the sports, the games, the shopping. Let's bring it all together. What does all of this actually mean for you, the person on the couch? Well, it means your media future is about to get a lot more fragmented, a whole lot more interactive, and way more transactional.
So, what's the bottom line here? First off, being a sports fan is about to get more complicated and probably more expensive. Second, get used to seeing games pop up in your streaming apps. They are the new secret weapon to keep you around. Third, that line between the show you're watching and an online store, it's basically disappearing. And maybe the most important takeaway of all, at the end of the day, your attention is the currency. It's what they're all fighting for.
The industry has finally had to admit a really hard truth. The party's over, and you know what? Not everyone is going to survive. This realization is forcing a complete reinvention of the entire business. So that's the big question we're tackling today. What on earth changed? Well, the answer involves a wild gold rush coming to a screeching halt, new battlegrounds popping up all over the globe, and a massive corporate reshuffling that is going to define media for the next decade. Okay, first things first, we have to understand that the initial kind of chaotic growth phase, it's officially dead. The industry's grown up, moving from a period of just wild spending to a much more disciplined, consolidated market. For years, the only goal was growth, growth, growth. Companies were just burning through cash to get subscribers, no matter what it cost. That playbook has been completely tossed out the window. Why? Because Wall Street changed its mind. The era of cheap money ended, and investors started demanding actual profits, not just promises of future growth. So now, it's not about how many subscribers you have. It's about whether you can actually build a sustainable business around them. Now, this isn't just a US story, not at all. While the American market is pretty saturated, the real fight for the next billion users is happening in places like Southeast Asia, India, and Africa. And out there, the rules of the game are completely different. Take Southeast Asia, for example. You think Netflix would just be the undisputed king, right? But a company called View is right on its heels. And they're not doing it by trying to be Netflix. No, they're dominating with a laser focus on Korean content and super local productions. It's absolute proof that just having global scale isn't always enough. And we're seeing the exact same story play out in Africa. The joint venture Showmax is using Comcast's powerful tech platform, but its real secret weapons are local content and exclusive mobile rights to the English Premier League. This hyper-local strategy has actually allowed it to blow past Netflix in key African markets. And then you've got India, where the entire market was just completely reshaped. Disney merged its assets with the local giant Reliance Jio. See, after losing a ton of subscribers when it dropped the incredibly popular IPL cricket rights, this new behemoth is now laser-focused on using cricket to dominate the advertising market, not just the subscription game.
So all these global pressures are creating a huge ripple effect back here in the US. It's forcing the old school media giants to consolidate, spin off parts of their business, and completely rethink their structures just to stay in the game. And this is where things get really, really interesting for the companies you thought you knew. And this is the corporate chess game of 2025. You've got the Paramount and Skydance merger creating a brand new aggressive player. That new company, what does it do? It immediately sets its sights on buying Warner Bros. Discovery. And all the while, Comcast is in the background, making its own massive moves.
So, Comcast's strategy is all about cleaning house. Think of it like this. They're taking their old, declining cable channels, the stuff in the attic, and shoving them into a separate company called Versant. Then they load that new company up with debt, basically walling off their past, so they can free up cash to pour into their future, the high-growth stuff like broadband and Peacock. It's a pretty slick move.
And right at the center of all this maneuvering is Warner Bros. Discovery. Seriously, what happens to this company, whether it gets sold off in pieces or bought whole, is going to set the course for the entire industry. It's the key domino, and everyone is just waiting to see which way it's going to fall. Okay, so given all this chaos and consolidation, what does it actually take to win now? The old metrics are gone, totally replaced by a much sharper focus on, you guessed it, financial sustainability. This right here is the new reality. Nobody cares about your total subscriber number anymore if those subscribers aren't actually engaged, or if they cancel after 1 month, or if they don't generate any real revenue. Engagement, retention, and ARPU, that's all that matters. ARPU is just a fancy term for average revenue per user. In other words, it's not about how many people you have, it's about how much each one of them is worth to you. So, who was actually built for this new era? Well, the winners are the companies with these big, diversified business models. Think Amazon with its retail and cloud empire, Apple with its hardware and services, and Google with search and YouTube. For them, streaming is just one part of a much bigger, more stable ecosystem that keeps you locked in. And then there's Netflix. It stands completely alone as the only pure-play streaming company to break through and achieve what you might call escape velocity. How did they do it? By stopping being just a streamer. It's evolved into something that looks a whole lot more like a traditional TV network, with a really successful ad tier and a growing slate of live events. All right, finally, let's look ahead. As we head into 2026, the dust is starting to settle a bit, but there are still several huge questions that are going to shape the next phase of this war. First up, the money. Will those cheaper, ad-supported plans become the main way we all watch? If adoption crosses that 60% mark, it fundamentally changes the business model for everybody, making it way more reliant on advertising dollars. Second, that huge domino we talked about, who finally buys Warner Bros. Discovery? And more importantly, will the sheer size of that deal trigger a massive fight with government regulators over media consolidation? That could be a huge story. Third, live sports. It remains the ultimate weapon in this fight. The big question is, will Amazon's massive investment in the new NBA rights be enough to push Prime Video into that #1 spot in market share? It's a huge gamble that could pay off big time. And looking even further down the road, what about engagement? Will the lines between streaming and gaming just keep getting blurrier? The holy grail here is a world where interacting with a story, playing a movie, becomes just as popular as passively watching it. So, the single most important thing to take away from all this is simple. The era of the standalone streaming service is ending. We are entering an age of rebundling, where video is just one piece of a much larger package. The great streaming rebellion against cable, well, it's over. And ironically, the future is starting to look an awful lot like the bundled world it tried so hard to destroy.